Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so for the longest time, a lot of people just assumed Agile was this niche thing strictly for IT folks, writing code in a basement, while the rest of us were out here drowning in endless email threads. But today, we are going to look at the data and some real-world case studies that absolutely prove otherwise. We're going to see exactly how modern marketing teams and human resources departments are taking these exact same Agile principles to stop wasting time, get their priorities totally aligned, and honestly, just get way more meaningful work done.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the rigid planning problem, then the Agile framework explained, moving on to making marketing agile, agility in human resources, and finally, avoiding common pitfalls.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the rigid planning problem.
So have you ever spent weeks, maybe even months building this massive campaign, only to find out the core messaging completely changed right before launch? It's the worst, right? But that is the exact waste caused by rigid planning. The reality is, the conditions most teams operate in today literally punish those long, inflexible cycles. Channels are multiplying, buyer behaviors are shifting mid-quarter, and those endless approval cycles just create massive delays. And here's the thing, the longer the distance between your execution and the actual feedback you receive, the greater the risk that your work doesn't even fit the reality of your business anymore.
Well, this is exactly where Agile comes in as the ultimate antidote. It allows you to commit to much smaller slices of work so you can adjust your priorities as conditions inevitably change. Now, to be clear, it's not about throwing planning out the window entirely. You absolutely still need to set quarterly goals. The difference is, you start treating that plan as a living, breathing roadmap. You shorten those feedback loops so you can catch problems early, level up your performance on every single cycle, and actually make the most out of the resources you have.
Moving right along to Section 2. The Agile Framework Explained.
To really grasp Agile, you just need to understand its core components, and we'll start with artifacts. Now that sounds fancy, but it simply means the visible lists and boards where you track what actually needs to get done. Think about it. If your work lives hidden away in your inbox, you are highly likely to miss dependencies or accidentally duplicate efforts. But by bringing everything out into the light on a sprint board with clear columns like Ready, In Progress, and In Review, you create total transparency for absolutely everyone on the team.
Now, you basically had two main choices when it comes to frameworks here. You're going to want to use Kanban if your priorities shift daily. Kanban is all about continuous flow and strictly capping how many tasks are actively being worked on at any one time. But on the flip side, you use Scrum if you need to coordinate delivery around strict deadlines. Scrum organizes your work into time-boxed cycles, usually 1 to 4 weeks, with a very specific defined goal. Honestly, though, in reality, a lot of modern teams end up using a hybrid of both, just depending on the exact shape of their workflow.
Okay, let's see this in action. Section 3, making marketing agile. Instead of building the whole campaign all at once, you slice it up into testable steps. This is a real game changer, because it means each successive sprint actually benefits from what you learned in the previous one. Let's say you want to increase demo requests. In Sprint 1, you just ship the minimum viable set, maybe a single landing page and 1 email, and you see how it performs in the real world. Then, in Sprint 2, you iterate based on that data, perhaps testing a new headline. By Sprint 3, you're expanding to webinars and retargeting. You test, you learn, you adapt constantly. Zero wasted effort.
Look, we all despise meetings that could have been an email, right? Well, Agile actually fixes this by relying on 4 lightweight ceremonies. This ensures every single meeting produces a tangible decision, a plan, or an improvement. Planning creates your backlog. The daily stand-up highlights exactly what's blocking you. The review gathers stakeholder feedback on actual completed work. And finally, the retrospective asks the single most important question: how do we improve our process for the next cycle?
And here's a massive, absolutely crucial reminder for those daily stand-ups. Do not make it a mere status report. The goal here isn't to justify your existence to your boss or to just read off a laundry list of what you did yesterday. The entire team should be looking at the visual workflow board together and asking one specific question. What is stopping us from moving this piece of value across the finish line today? It completely shifts the team culture to decentralized, collaborative problem solving.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. Section 4, agility in human resources.
So when Principal Financial Group actually rolled out Agile, they did something super interesting. They mapped out their HR capabilities into portfolios to prioritize value and ensure they were acting cohesively as one HR. Instead of fielding chaotic, disjointed requests coming from every possible direction, they grouped their services, things like talent acquisition, compensation, and workforce planning, into cohesive portfolios. They needed a strategic way to manage the massive demand on their operations, and a visual governance structure was exactly how they did it.
But as Agile coach Jeff Howie quickly discovered, rolling this out to the non-IT HR business teams, well, it illuminated some really unique cultural roadblocks. While the IT teams supporting HR adapted pretty smoothly because they were already used to these kinds of frameworks, the actual business side of HR, the recruiters, the performance management folks, they faced a totally different reality. When Jeff tried to roll Agile out to them, he hit a massive wall.
And here was the light bulb moment. A team of learning and development experts actually has highly specific, non-overlapping duties. This makes traditional Agile swarming incredibly difficult. See, in software, if a piece of code is stuck, multiple developers can swarm it to get it finished. But over in HR, the person running executive coaching often literally cannot just jump in and help the person processing payroll or managing an intern onboarding program. They are isolated specialists.
Plus, there was this whole other major culture shock. HR teams are historically wired to say yes to every executive request and, just get it done. That habit directly clashes with the core Agile principle of strictly limiting active work in progress. Culturally, they were totally used to accepting massive bottlenecks and relying on late-night heroics just to meet deadlines. So telling them to put a hard limit on the number of active projects they were running, that went against their very nature.
So what did they do? Instead of just cramming rigid IT rules down their throats, they personalized the principles. They recognized that while they were specialists, they could absolutely use visual boards to see exactly who was overloaded during specific seasons. They applied the concept of swarming to cross-train each other on internal team projects. Ultimately, they built a sustainable pace so they weren't just one bus accident away from a departmental disaster, which vastly improved their own succession planning.
Okay, let's bring it home. Section 5. Avoiding common pitfalls.
If you want to measure actual true success, you've got to look at 3 layers of metrics all at once. First, outcome. This tells you the final business result, things like pipeline or adoption rates. Second, flow. This shows you your real efficiency by tracking cycle times so you can spot hidden approval bottlenecks early on. And third, learning. This tells you if your initial hypothesis was even correct in the first place. Because think about it, if you only track the outcome, you're never going to know exactly why a project succeeded or failed.
And this brings us to the classic traps. Look, if your team is constantly starting new things before finishing the old ones, your Agile setup is fundamentally broken. If everything is labeled urgent, then literally nothing is. And if you're having daily stand-ups but nobody is actually making decisions or clearing blockers, you don't have an Agile process. You just have a zombie meeting taking up space on your calendar. Agile is meant to clear the clutter, not add to it.
So what's the fix? The absolute lowest risk path forward is pretty simple actually. You reduce your active work, you clarify exactly who owns what, and you just run a single pilot cycle before trying to scale up to the whole organization. Pick one team or one specific campaign to start. Then you establish a rigid definition of done. This is a crucial checklist that ensures brand, legal, and quality standards are fully met before anyone gets to claim a task is actually finished.
So I'll leave you with this. Take a look at your own outdated quarterly plans and ask yourself, what are you waiting for? The methodology absolutely works outside of IT. The case studies from marketing and HR prove it, and the tools are incredibly accessible right now. Take a look at your desk, look at your team's backlog, and start making your work visible today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.